Welcome to Boring History for Relaxing channel. Tonight we step softly toward the secret to sleeping in the world's most remote desert camps, where the horizon looks unfinished, the air tastes faintly of stone, and the sun lowers itself like a glowing coin into a vast bowl of sand. You stand at the edge of distance itself, with nothing around you except dunes, gravel plains, thorny shrubs, and the very confident feeling that your phone signal has quietly resigned from its job. You probably will not survive this with your normal bedtime routine, especially if that routine involves scrolling for 40 minutes and calling it relaxation. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you settle in, post your location and your local time, so this little night camp can stretch across the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive while the last heat still rises from the ground, not in waves exactly, but in a tired shimmer that makes the desert seem half awake and half dreaming. The camp is little more than a scatter of low tents, rolled blankets, water skins, cooking pots, and footprints pressed into cooling sand. There is no grand entrance to no polished reception desk, no mint on the pillow. The desert does not do hospitality that way. It simply allows you to remain alive, which is honestly a generous upgrade from some vacation packages. You are told, gently and without drama, to walk slowly, not because the camp is fragile, though it is, but because your body has not yet understood where it is. The world's great deserts have trained travelers for thousands of years to respect pace over pride. Caravans once crossed the Sahara carrying salt, gold, cloth, and stories between North and West Africa, and the distances were so enormous that travel depended not on bravery alone, but on wells, guides, animals, and discipline. The mainstream fact is simple and humbling desert travel has always been a careful partnership between people, routes, water, and timing. So you do not charge into camp like a heroic explorer from a painting. Chin lifted, boots dramatic, you shuffle, sip, blink, and pretend your ankles know what they are doing. The sand gives way under each step, making you work just enough to feel mildly betrayed by the planet. A guide points to the darker line where the dune drops into shadow. That is where the evening will cool fastest. Another patch of ground, flat and inviting, is quietly rejected because it sits too low in the desert. The comfortable-looking place is not always the wise place, which is also true of suspiciously cheap hotel buffets. The first secret to sleeping here is not a blanket, a pillow, or some modern inflatable mattress with a name like Cloud Emperor Supreme. The first secret is surrendering to the camp's rhythm. You do not decide when the desert becomes restful, the desert decides. And eventually you become polite enough to notice. Heat drains from the stones, the wind changes its tone, shadows stretch across the ground like spilled ink. People lower their voices, not because anyone demands silence, but because the sky itself seems to be listening. You watch the tent settle into evening. In many desert cultures, shelters are designed low, practical, and portable, built to face wind rather than impress strangers. Bedouin tents, traditionally woven from goat hair or camel hair, can tighten in damp air and breathe in dry heat, which is the sort of clever engineering that makes your ordinary duvet look emotionally unprepared. A quirky tidbit follows naturally from this. Some traditional black tents are not black because desert people forgot cheerful colours exist, but because dark woven hair can create shade, durability, and warmth when used skillfully. The desert wardrobe department may be severe, but it is not foolish. You are given a place to sit, and sitting becomes an event. Knees fold, hands rest, shoulder rows drop. Someone pours tea slowly, as though speed might offend the kettle. The cup is small, the sweetness direct, and the heat somehow comforting, even though the day has already roasted you like a thoughtful vegetable. You notice that nobody drinks recklessly. Water is treated with calm respect, not panic. That steadiness is part of the sleep secret too. A nervous body gulps, a desert body measures. Historians still argue whether the romantic image of desert nomads tells us more about real mobile life or about the fantasies of settled people who wrote about them from safer rooms. You feel that debate in the camp itself. Nothing here is romantic in the easy sense. The sand gets into seams, the wind has opinions, the ground is not soft just because it is made of tiny pieces. Yet there is beauty here, not painted over hardship, but sitting beside it like an old companion who does not need to speak. As twilight deepens, the camp becomes less visual and more musical. A rope taps against a pole. A camel exhales with the weary authority of an old landlord. Somewhere, a pot lid clicks. Your own breathing becomes louder than expected. And for a moment you wonder if you are the noisy one. The city creature who's brought an entire invisible suitcase of habits into this wide quiet. You begin to understand that sleep in a remote desert camp is not conquered. It is negotiated. The ground is brushed clear where you will rest. A mat goes down first, then bedding, then a layer that traps warmth for later. Because the desert is famous for changing its personality after sunset. During the day, it behaves like a furnace with scenic views. At night, it may suddenly remember it owns winter. This dramatic temperature swing happens because dry air and clear skies allow heat to escape quickly after dark. You do not need to become a scientist to appreciate this. You only need to feel your fingers begin making small complaints. Still, the cooling air helps. Your skin relaxes, your eyes stop narrowing against brightness. The first stars appear, faint at first, then almost embarrassingly numerous, as though the sky has opened a storage room it forgot to inventory. There is no glowing town nearby, no restless traffic. No neighbour moving furniture at midnight with mysterious athletic commitment. Just the stars, the sand, the low camp, and the strange comfort of having very few choices. You can sleep or you can lie awake. Either way, the desert remains calmly indifferent, which is oddly soothing. The world does not require your performance here. No one expects productivity from a person wrapped in blankets beside a dune. Your only task is to become small enough to rest. A final instruction comes quietly. Keep your shoes close, cover your water, tuck loose cloth beneath you, and do not leave food open unless you want to host a midnight tasting menu for insects. This is not fear, it is housekeeping with consequences. Remote camps survive because small habits are repeated until they become invisible. The secret is not one grand trick. It begins with attention to wind, heat, thirst, ground, animals, darkness, and the humble fact that comfort is easier when you stop arguing with where you are. So you lie back. The sand beneath the mat still holds a memory of the day. The air above you cools towards silver. Somewhere beyond the tents, the desert stretches farther than your thoughts can comfortably travel. You listen, you breathe, and little by little, the edge of the world becomes a place where sleep might find you. You follow the camp guide away from the clustered tents, stepping into a wide patch of sand that looks, to your sleepy modern eyes, exactly like every other wide patch of sand. This is where the desert quietly reveals one of its oldest jokes. The ground is always telling you things, but it refuses to use subtitles. You see ripples, shallow hollows, thorn stems, pebbles, a few pale shells of beetles, and a faint trail crossing the slope. The guide sees wind direction, drainage, animal movement, last night's gusts, and at least 3 reasons not to put your blanket where you are about to put it. Excellent. The sand has a resume. You begin with the slope. A dune may look soft and inviting, like a giant golden pillow placed there by an extremely ambitious decorator. Sleeping directly on a slope is a mistake your hips will remember. The guide presses a foot into the sand and watches how it gives way. Fresh windblown sand is loose and silky, lovely to touch. Less lovely when it creeps into bedding and rearranges your sleeping place one grain at a time. Firmer ground, often found near the base of dunes or on gravelly flats, can hold bedding more evenly. It may not look luxurious, but the desert has never promised memory foam. The desert offers stability, which is less glamorous but much more useful at midnight. Then you learn to avoid the innocent-looking low place. A dry wash, called a wadi in many Arabic-speaking regions, may appear as a shallow channel, smooth and clear, with tempting flat ground, yet wadis can flood suddenly when rain falls far away, sometimes outside your view entirely, just cold. This is one of the mainstream historical facts desert travellers have respected for ages. Caravan routes and camps often depended on knowing where seasonal water moved, not merely where water was visible. The desert may look empty, but hidden movement shapes it. Water writes its own memory into the land, then vanishes and lets careless visitors assume the page is blank. You stand at the edge of one such channel and imagine lying there, pleased with your clever choice, only to become part of a surprise desert plumbing demonstration. Not ideal, not restful, not the kind of immersive nature experience anyone should request. So you step higher, onto ground that drains away from the channel. A camp does not need to be on a mountaintop. It only needs to avoid becoming a bathtub with stars overhead. The wind comes next. You crouch and feel it crossing your cheek. During the day, hot air may rise from sun-baked surfaces and stir local breezes. At night, cooling slopes can send air sliding downward. The guide reads small clues: the direction of ripples, the way dry grass leans, the side of a shrub where sand has piled. You're not simply looking for a place with no wind. In a remote desert, that is a charming fantasy, like expecting a camel to respect personal space. You are looking for a place where wind will not funnel directly through camp. Slap the tent cloth and sprinkle grit across your dreams with the commitment of a tiny, rude chef. A small rise, a boulder line, or a cluster of scrub can soften the breeze. Too much shelter, however, can hide insects or animals, so the perfect place is not dramatic. It is modest, balanced, unshowy. Desert wisdom often looks boring from a distance, which is convenient for tonight's theme and for anyone who has ever survived by making sensible choices instead of cinematic ones. You study tracks. Some are easy camel pads, broad and soft-edged, pressed like rounded cushions. Goat prints look sharper, more pointed. A little fussy, smaller trails stitch across the sand, made by beetles, lizards, or rodents. In parts of the Sahara and Arabian deserts, guides have long identified travellers, livestock, and weather from tracks with astonishing skill. A quirky tidbit settles into the lesson. Certain beetles leave delicate dotted trails that can look like tiny decorative sewing, as though the desert hired a very small tailor with excellent patience. You admire the artistry and silently hope the tailor does not visit your blanket. Animal signs do not mean panic. They simply mean the land is occupied. You choose a place not directly on a trail, not beside a burrow, not under a shrub that seems to have become an insect apartment complex. You give the local residents their commuting routes. This is polite, and also reduces the chance of waking because something with whiskers has decided your sleeve is a fascinating new tunnel. Historians still argue whether many ancient desert camps were placed mainly for access to water, protection from wind, social visibility, or the habits of specific herding routes. The answer may shift with season, region, and purpose. A trading caravan, a nomadic family, a military patrol, and a pilgrimage group do not all need the same kind of night. Still, they share one quiet habit: they do not treat empty land as empty. They read it as a layered map. You notice old signs of camp, a faint circle of stones, charcoal crumbs, a scatter of pale ash pressed into the earth, a few flattened places where bedding may have rested. These marks whisper that others have trusted this ground, though not all old camps should be reused without thought. If the old fire site sits too close to dry brush, it is a warning disguised as convenience. If the ground is littered with scraps, it may invite scavengers. Human laziness, tragically, is not a recent invention. Somewhere in history, someone definitely said, "I will clean that in the morning," and then became a lesson for future archaeologists. You move a little farther and test the ground with your heel. It is level enough. It is raised from the wash. It has a low ridge to one side and open visibility to the other. The wind crosses gently, not directly. There are a few tracks, no burrows, no thorn branches waiting to hook your blanket like a grumpy old finger. The guide nods. You feel absurdly proud, as though you personally negotiated peace with geology. Now the camp's sleeping places begin to make sense. Each bedroll faces a practical direction. Gear is placed within reach but not scattered. Shoes are set where your hand can find them in darkness. Water is covered and upright. A lantern is kept low, because bright light ruins night vision and attracts every winged creature that believes civilization has finally arrived. You smooth your mat and realize that choosing ground is not a prelude to rest. It is part of rest. The secret is simple enough to sound disappointing. Sleep begins with trust in the place beneath you. Not blind trust, not dreamy trust, but earned trust. You read the land, respect its moods, avoid its little traps, and accept its small protections. The desert does not tuck you in, it merely gives you clues. You gather them slowly, like warm stones in your palm, until the flat patch of sand no longer looks random, it looks chosen. The shelter waits low against the sand, not like a house trying to defeat the desert, but like a quiet agreement with it. You crouch to enter because the doorway is small, and the desert enjoys reminding visitors that dignity is optional. Inside, the air changes. The wind softens. The light turns brown and gold through the fabric. Outside, the open sky seems endless enough to swallow your thoughts. Inside, the world shrinks to woven walls, folded bedding, hanging straps, a kettle, a lantern, and the faint smell of dust, wool, smoke, and sun-warmed rope. You begin to understand why desert shelters are rarely tall unless they absolutely need to be. A high roof catches wind. A low roof lets gusts pass over with less argument. The tent poles are not placed for elegance. They are placed because someone, long ago, learned exactly how much wind a tired sleeper can tolerate before becoming a deeply philosophical bundle of irritation. The ropes angle outward, pegs bite into firmer ground, loose edges are weighted with stones or sand. Nothing here says luxury, yet everything says, "Let us not fly away tonight," which is a comforting design philosophy. In many parts of the Middle East and North Africa, nomadic groups have used black tents woven from goat hair for centuries. Goat hair swells slightly when damp, helping the weave tighten against rain, while in dry weather the fabric allows air to pass through. This is the mainstream historical fact tucked into the fabric itself. Portable shelters were not primitive accidents, but adaptive technologies shaped by climate, herding, trade, and movement. The tent is not just a roof. It is architecture that can be packed, loaded, carried, repaired, divided, expanded, inherited, and argued over by relatives with strong opinions. You touch the wall lightly. It feels coarse, but not crude. The fibers hold tiny smells of animal, fire, and travel. A woven shelter has memory. It remembers storms, births, meals, negotiations, jokes, illnesses, songs, and the 1,000 tiny domestic tasks that make survival look ordinary. Your modern bedroom may contain charging cables and a pillow that promises orthopedic destiny. But this tent has crossed landscapes. It has probably heard more secrets than your entire group chat, and has leaked fewer of them. A windbreak stands near the sleeping area, made of reed mats, woven panels, brush, or cloth stretched between supports. It does not block the whole desert, because nothing blocks the whole desert. It simply interrupts the wind enough to protect the small human zone where bodies, blankets, and cooking smoke can exist. You watch someone adjust one corner by the width of a hand. That tiny change shifts the airflow. The flame steadies, the bedding stops twitching, the camp becomes calmer. It feels almost magical, although the magic is mostly patient observation and not buying ridiculous equipment with 7 zippers. A quirky tidbit drifts in with the dust. Some desert travellers have used their saddles, packs, and even sleeping camels as part of the night shelter arrangement. A resting camel can become a warm wall, a wind marker, and a grumbling neighbour all at once. This is efficient, though perhaps less charming if the camel has opinions about your personal space. You glance toward one animal folded outside like a large, judgmental suitcase. It chews slowly, giving the impression that it has seen empires rise and fall and found them nutritionally disappointing. Inside the shelter, sleeping places are arranged with care. The most protected spot may go to elders, children, guests, or someone unwell. Openings face away from the strongest wind when possible. Bedding is kept off the dampest ground, even where damp seems impossible. In some deserts, condensation can settle during the cold night, and the underside of blankets can collect a surprising chill. The mat beneath you matters. It is not merely padding. It separates your body from the ground that will soon pull warmth away with quiet efficiency. Historians still argue whether the earliest portable desert shelters developed mainly from herding needs, seasonal migration, trade mobility, or older traditions of temporary camp life shared across different environments. The debate continues because tents leave fewer traces than stone houses. Fabric decays, poles vanish, ropes rot. Archaeology loves a good wall, but a vanished campsite is trickier, like trying to study a meal from the smell of a memory. Still, ethnography, language, tools, and scattered remains help scholars imagine how people made homes that could disappear by morning. You settle lower, and the shelter becomes a kind of lesson in humility. It does not promise full control. Sand still creeps under edges, wind still presses the walls, sounds still travel through cloth. If someone coughs outside, you hear it. If a goat stamps, you know. If the kettle lid rattles, your brain briefly decides it must investigate, because apparently your brain has appointed itself night manager. Yet the shelter gives just enough separation for the nervous body to loosen. Not isolation, not luxury, a boundary. That boundary matters. In an open desert, the sky can feel too large. The stars are beautiful. Yes, but beauty at that scale can make a person feel like a misplaced breadcrumb. A tent restores proportion. The roofline tells your eyes where to stop. The woven wall catches shadows and makes them familiar. The poles create corners where none existed. Suddenly you are not lying exposed on a planet spinning through space, which is technically always true but rarely helpful at bedtime. You're inside a small, breathing room made by human hands. The lantern is lowered, glow pools near the floor, warm and sleepy. Someone ties another cord, folds a flap, checks a peg. These gestures are quiet, repetitive, nearly ceremonial. They are not glamorous, but they are soothing in the way old routines are soothing. Fold, tighten, weigh, tuck. The body understands repeated care even when the mind keeps wandering. The shelter becomes less like an object and more like a lullaby made of cloth. You slide your bedding into place. A blanket rolls beneath your shoulder. A woven mat crackles softly. Your hand finds the edge of the ground sheet, and you tuck it inward to discourage sand from joining you with its usual enthusiasm. The air smells warmer now. Outside, the wind passes along the tent skin with a steady hush, like a giant hand smoothing fabric. You can still feel the desert beyond the walls, immense and awake, but it no longer presses directly against your ribs. The secret here is not hiding from the desert. That would be adorable and impossible. The secret is shaping a little pocket of human scale inside it. A low roof, a tight rope, a weighted edge, a mat between body and earth, a flap turned away from wind. Small designs, repeated across generations, become comfort. You breathe beneath the woven darkness, and the shelter holds just enough of the night away for sleep to come closer. The cup reaches your hands while the rim still shines with heat. It is small enough to seem almost symbolic, which is exactly how dessert drinking often feels at first. You accept it with both hands, because this is not the place to act casual with water, tea, hospitality, or anything else that has worked hard to exist. The liquid is sweet, dark, and fragrant or vermont, and when you breathe over it, the steam carries the smell of leaves, smoke, metal, and sugar around you. People sit close to the ground, letting the evening settle around their shoulders. Nobody rushes. Even the kettle seems to understand that haste is a city disease. You sip carefully. The tea is hot, which feels unreasonable in a land that has already spent the day trying to toast your bones. Yet it works. Warm drinks can encourage slower sipping, and slower sipping keeps people from emptying precious supplies thoughtlessly. In many desert societies, tea is not merely refreshment, it is welcome, rhythm, courtesy, negotiation, and a way to make time visible. The mainstream historical fact is simple. Across the Sahara and many desert regions of North Africa and the Middle East, tea ceremonies and shared drinks became central parts of hospitality, especially among mobile communities where generosity and survival were closely linked. You watch the pour, the kettle is lifted high, and the tea falls in a thin amber stream into tiny glasses. Foam gathers at the top. The pourer does not seem impressed by gravity, burns, or your anxious expression. There is often skill in making foam, especially in Saharan tea traditions, where the height and repetition of pouring can cool the drink slightly, mix sugar, and create that delicate froth. You admire this as art, while also thinking that if you tried it, everyone would be wearing tea. Some talents should remain in their natural habitat. A second glass may taste stronger, a third may taste sweeter or softer, depending on the custom. In parts of the Sahara, people sometimes speak of 3 rounds of tea, each with its own character. Though sayings vary from place to place, the first can be bitter, the next gentler, the last sweet. Like the arc of a long conversation with someone who began suspicious and ended by offering you dates. You sit there, slowly being educated by a beverage that has better social skills than most meetings. Water itself waits nearby in covered containers. It is not displayed carelessly. Skins, jars, metal cans, plastic vessels, and insulated flasks all belong to different eras of desert camping. But the rule remains, old protect the supply. A lid is not a detail. Keeps out sand, insects, spilled ash, curious fingers, and the kind of mysterious floating speck that appears whenever humans gather outdoors. You learn not to leave your cup open. The desert is generous with scenery, but not with clean surfaces. Hydration here is not dramatic. Nobody announces, "I am now hydrating," like a wellness influencer trapped in a canyon. People drink at intervals. They notice lips, headaches, urine colour, heat, sweat, and fatigue. In dry heat, sweat can vanish quickly from the skin, so you may not feel as wet as you are. Your body loses water while maintaining the illusion that everything is fine, which is rude, but biologically consistent. The camp teaches you to sip before thirst becomes a complaint with legal representation. There is also salt to consider. Food, broth, olives, cheese, preserved meat. or salted grains may help balance losses during long travel, depending on what is available. Desert people do not always separate food and hydration into modern categories. A bowl of soup, a handful of dates, a cup of milk, or a salty stew may all belong to the same quiet project keeping the body steady enough to sleep. You begin to see bedtime not as a single moment, but as the result of small decisions made all evening. A quirky tidbit arrives with a goatskin water bag hanging from a wooden support. In some dry regions, porous containers can cool water slightly through evaporation. Especially when air moves across the surface, the effect is not a miracle. It will not produce a sparkling mountain spring with a luxury label and an absurd price, but a little cooling can feel like kindness. Clay jars can do something similar when moisture seeps outward and evaporates. You touch one and feel the faint chill, the desert's version of refrigeration, powered by patience and physics. Historians still argue whether certain ancient desert routes grew primarily around permanent wells, seasonal pools, political control of water points, or the social networks of people who knew how to find them. Water is never just water in these landscapes. It is geography, law, memory, status, and sometimes conflict. A well can make a route possible. A poisoned or guarded well can end a journey. A hidden cistern can preserve a community through a hard season. You drink again, smaller this time, and the cup feels heavier with history. The evening ritual continues. Someone rinses a glass with a splash so tiny it would make a dishwasher faint. Another person measures tea leaves by habit, not by spoon. Sugar is broken or poured. The kettle returns to the coals. The sound is soft, a hollow metal murmur. You notice that rituals reduce worry. When people repeat a familiar sequence, the mind relaxes into order. Boil, pour, sip, pass, cover, store, check, refill if possible. What seems ordinary becomes a structure for calm. Your body responds. The headache you did not admit you had begins to fade at the edges. Your breathing slows. Your hands warm around the cup. The sweetness lands in your stomach with a quiet reassurance. You are not full, not heavy, not restless. You are gently anchored. This matters for sleep. Too much water too late can send you stumbling into the cold darkness, searching for probable privacy while pretending not to be startled by shrubs. Too little water leaves the mouth dry and the mind prickly. The camp finds the middle path, which is less exciting than extremes and therefore much better for rest. One final cup is offered, and you take only what you need. That phrase, what you need, begins to feel like the true grammar of the desert, not what you crave, not what proves you are comfortable, not what looks impressive in a travel photograph. Just what you need. Enough warmth, enough sweetness, enough water, enough company. The cup leaves your hand, the kettle settles near the embers, covered vessels wait in the dimness like small promises. You lick a trace of sugar from your lip and feel the night becoming kinder. One measured sip at a time. The fire is small, almost shy, a low orange pulse tucked into a shallow hollow of sand and stones. You might expect a grand blaze, something dramatic enough to make shadows leap across the dunes like dancers in an old epic. But the desert does not reward theatrical waste. Fuel is precious here. Wood does not simply appear because someone feels cozy. Every twig has travelled through heat, drought, goats, insects, and human need before reaching the flames. So the campfire is not a bonfire. It is a careful little heart, and everyone treats it as if it has earned its rest too. You sit near enough to feel warmth on your knees, but not so near that smoke chooses your face as its personal retirement village. Smoke is like that. It has the entire open desert available, yet somehow it still wants a close relationship with your eyes. You shift slightly, trying to look dignified while blinking like a confused owl. Someone adjusts a few thorn branches, and the smoke rises straighter. Desert fire tending, you discover, is not about domination. It is about tiny corrections. In many desert regions, people historically used whatever fuel the landscape could offer: dry shrubs, acacia, tamarisk, thornwood, palm ribs, dung, and plant roots gathered with care. Dried animal dung has been used as fuel across many treeless environments, including deserts and steppes, because it burns steadily when properly dried. That is the mainstream historical fact glowing at your feet in fuel-poor landscapes. Survival has often depended on using humble materials efficiently. The idea may offend your modern nose at first, but the fire does not seem embarrassed. It burns politely and frankly, with better manners than many scented candles. The thornwoods snap softly, sparks rise, then vanish before reaching the stars. A cooking pot rests near the coals rather than directly in a furious flame. Slow heat saves fuel and protects food from burning. You watch the cook slide embers with a stick, arranging them like a quiet chess game. A flatbread warms on a metal plate. The smell is simple and comforting: flour, smoke, a little oil, maybe onion, maybe spice. The camp begins to feel less like a place you arrived at and more like a place that is holding you for the night. A quirky tidbit makes the scene stranger and more charming in some desert traditions. Ashes from old fires could help start the next fire by preserving small coals or by marking a protected hearth site. Though methods varied widely by region, fire was not always a fresh invention each evening. Sometimes it was continuity, carried in embers, sheltered in containers, or rebuilt where yesterday's warmth had slept. You imagine a coal travelling through the day like a tiny orange secret. This seems heroic for something that would lose a fight with a puddle. The fire also manages social distance. People gather in a loose circle, not packed together, not scattered too far. Lots of faces glow and fade as flames shift. The dark beyond the light becomes deeper, but not threatening. The fire says, "Here is the human centre. Here is where hands warm. Bread softens. Stories begin, and everyone pretends not to notice who is getting sleepy first. It is you. Obviously it is you. You're holding your cup with the solemn focus of a person trying not to yawn into history." Historians still argue whether small desert hearths found in archaeological sites should be understood mainly as cooking places, social centres, seasonal markers, or brief traces of travel through harsh terrain. A little charcoal in the ground can carry many possible meanings. Was it a family meal, a caravan halt, a hunting stop, a ritual moment, a repair camp? The remains are often modest because desert people did not always leave grand buildings behind. Sometimes the evidence of life is just ash, bone fragments, stone tools, and the patient pattern of use. You look at the stones around the fire. They're not random. A ring can shield embers from wind, hold heat, and reduce the spread of sparks. In some camps, a shallow pit helps protect the flame. In others, portable braziers or metal trays keep fire contained and leave less trace on the ground. Modern desert travellers may follow the principle of leaving as little mark as possible, but the older habit of careful fire use comes from necessity as much as ethics. A careless fire wastes fuel, damages scarce plants, risks tents, and turns sleep into a very inconvenient emergency. The camp does not burn green wood, it smokes too much and wastes effort. Dry wood is chosen, broken small, and fed gradually. You learn that a fire can be too large for comfort. A roaring blaze throws harsh light, eats fuel, attracts attention, and heats one side of your body while the other side negotiates with the cold. A small fire invites you closer without overwhelming you. It asks you to lower your voice. It makes the night feel slower. Food finishes cooking, and the pot is moved aside. Embers remain, red under grey ash. This is the softest stage of the fire, the stage most suited to sleep. Flames are lively, embers are thoughtful. They glow with the tired patience of old advice. Someone spreads ash gently to reduce smoke. Someone checks that no sparks have landed near cloth. The movements are unhurried but exact. The desert is not a place where you assume things are fine. You make them fine, then check again. The smell of smoke settles into your blanket, not heavily, just enough to say you've spent an evening outdoors among people who know how to make warmth from scraps. Your hair will probably remember this tomorrow, but your hair has survived worse, including hotel shampoo and ambitious hats. For now, the smoke keeps some insects away, flavours the air, and gives the camp a centre that the darkness respects. You notice how little is wasted. A small flame boils water, coals cook bread, ash banks heat, stones hold warmth. Even the last glow helps guide sleepy feet around the camp. Comfort here is layered from small efficiencies. Nothing is extra for long. The fire teaches this without scolding. It simply burns down, giving everything it can, then asking to be covered, watched, and left safely. As the last flames fold into coals, conversation thins. The camp becomes a ring of dim faces and listening bodies. The stars seem brighter now that the fire has lowered its voice. You stretch your fingers toward the glow, one more time, warming the joints, softening the palms. The secret of firelight in a remote desert camp is not brightness, it is restraint. Enough heat to loosen the body, enough light to calm the mind, enough smoke to mark the evening. Enough care to let everyone sleep without fear of what warmth might do if neglected. The meal appears without ceremony, which somehow makes it feel more generous. A cloth is spread low on the ground, weighted at the corners so the wind does not turn supper into a migrating event. Bowls settle into little hollows, bread is stacked beneath a covering. Dates wait in a small dish, glossy and wrinkled, looking like they have survived the desert with more grace than you have managed in one afternoon. You sit close enough to reach, but not so close that your knee becomes part of the serving arrangement. Desert dining has manners, and some of them involve not putting your boot near the lentils. The food is simple, but it carries a great deal of intelligence. Flatbread, grains, dried fruit, preserved meat, beans, clarified butter, hard cheese, rice, millet, barley, couscous, and stews have all travelled through desert history in different regions because they solve practical problems. They keep well, they can be portioned, they can be cooked with limited water. They provide energy without requiring a kitchen the size of a palace. The mainstream historical fact is clear. Caravans across desert routes often depended on durable foods such as dates, grain products, dried meat, and milk foods because long travel demanded nourishment that could survive heat and distance. You tear a piece of bread, it is warm, flexible, faintly smoky, and perfect for scooping. In this camp, cutlery is mostly optional, which is excellent news if you have ever lost a spoon in a backpack and treated it like a personal tragedy. Bread becomes plate, tool, napkin, and quiet comfort. It gathers sauce from the bowl, carries beans to your mouth, softens with broth, and leaves just enough flour on your fingers to remind you that refinement is not always the point. The body does not relax because dinner is fancy, and it relaxes because dinner makes sense. The stew is modest, built from ingredients chosen for endurance. Lentils or chickpeas may thicken it, a little meat may flavour it. Onion, cumin, coriander, pepper, or dried herbs may drift through the warmth, depending on the region and supplies. Nobody wastes spice. A pinch can change an entire pot, which is useful when supplies must last. You lift the bowl and breathe in steam that smells like earth. Smoke, salt, and patience. Your stomach, which had been quietly writing complaint letters, becomes more cooperative. A date follows, sweetness blooms quickly on your tongue. Rich and sticky, dates have been cultivated in desert and oasis regions for thousands of years, especially where date palms could thrive with irrigation and groundwater. A palm grove can feed people, animals, and trade networks, can provide fruit, shade, fibre, building materials, and a strong reason to respect whoever controls the water. You chew slowly because dates deserve attention, and also because eating too fast after heat can make the body feel as if it has been tricked into extra labour. Sleep prefers a calm stomach. A quirky tidbit sits inside the humble date pit in some places. Date seeds have been ground or roasted for animal feed, coffee-like drinks, or other practical uses. The fruit is not the only useful part. Desert thrift can be astonishing. Even a seed gets a second chance at employment, which is more than can be said for certain decorative throw pillows. You set the pit aside and imagine generations of people finding use in what others might toss away. Because in harsh country, waste is not just rude, it is foolish. You notice the portions. They're satisfying but not heavy. This is not the moment for a heroic feast that leaves you lying awake, bargaining with your digestive system under a billion stars. The best camp food helps the body settle, too little, and hunger sharpens the mind, too much. And the stomach begins an overnight construction project. The camp chooses balance, warm grains, bread, dates, tea, broth, perhaps a bit of fat, perhaps yogurt or dried cheese, enough to restore you. Not enough to make you regret owning a torso. Historians still argue whether the spread of certain foods across desert regions followed trade routes more strongly than migration. Conquest, climate shifts, religious travel, or local experimentation. A bowl may look ordinary, but it can contain centuries of movement. Spices cross seas, grains adapt to dry fields, cooking pots borrow shapes from neighbours, pilgrims carry tastes home. Traders exchange not only goods, but preferences. You scoop another bite and realise that dinner is a map you can eat, which is convenient, since paper maps are notoriously low in protein. Some foods are designed not for immediate pleasure, but for survival and sleep later. Dried meat can be shaved into stews, hard cheese can travel without spoiling quickly, clarified butter can last longer than fresh butter because water and the milk solids are removed. Fermented milk products can offer nourishment in forms better suited to heat and movement. Among camel and goat herders, milk has often been a vital food, fresh when available, transformed when necessary. This is the genius of camp cuisine. It accepts that nature does not provide a refrigerator and proceeds anyway. You are handed a small serving of something salty. The salt wakes your mouth, then seems to steady the whole body. After heat, salt can feel almost medicinal. The trick is not excess. Excess is rarely the desert's favourite subject. The trick is enough. Enough salt to support the body, enough carbohydrate to restore energy, enough sweetness to comfort, enough warmth to invite drowsiness. Food becomes a quiet instrument, tuning you down from the sharpness of travel. Around the cloth, people speak between bites. Conversation stays soft, broken by chewing, pouring, and the occasional practical instruction. Someone warns you that a certain pepper is stronger than it looks. Naturally, it is tiny, because tiny peppers often have the confidence of warlords. You try a careful amount and feel warmth raise behind your nose. Not pain, exactly. More like your sinuses have received unexpected news. Everyone notices, politely pretends not to notice, and then someone passes bread with the kindness of a saint. Crumbs are gathered, leftovers are covered. No food is left open to invite insects, rodents, foxes, or the ambitious night opinions of camp animals. The cloth is shaken away from the sleeping area. Bowls are scraped with care, washed with minimal water or wiped with sand and cloth where that is the practical custom. Cleanliness in a desert camp is not sparkling perfection. It is disciplined prevention. Do not create smells that attract trouble. Do not waste water to chase an impossible shine. Do not leave tomorrow's breakfast exposed unless you want to share it with creatures who did not subscribe. The meal ends slowly. Your hands smell faintly of bread and smoke. Your stomach is warm but not crowded. Your limbs feel heavier in a pleasant way, as if someone has poured calm into your joints. The secret of food that travels lightly is that it also lets sleep travel lightly. It does not drag you into discomfort. It does not demand attention all night. It nourishes, steadies, and steps aside. You lean back, listening to the last small sounds of bowls being stacked. and feel dinner becoming part of the dark, another soft layer between you and the enormous desert night. The first animal sound arrives just as your body begins to believe in stillness. It is a soft, wet, thoughtful chewing from somewhere beyond the low shelter, followed by a long breath that sounds almost disappointed in the entire human species. A camel is resting nearby, folded into itself with the architectural confidence of a collapsible chair designed by a committee. You cannot see much of it in the dark, only the shape of its neck and the slow movement of its jaw, but you feel its presence like a large, warm opinion beside the camp. You listen more carefully. The desert night is not silent, it is simply selective. During the heat of the day, many creatures hide from the sun, slipping into burrows, shades, cracks, or the cooler undersides of stones. At night, the land becomes active in smaller ways. Beetles move, rodents test the air, foxes travel lightly over sand, insects click and scrape, goats shift their hooves if they are tethered nearby, camels grunt, chew, sigh, and occasionally make a noise so ancient and rude that you understand why no one asked them to sing professionally. The mainstream historical factum is waiting right there in the darkness. Camels, especially dromedaries more in the hot deserts of North Africa and Arabia, became essential to long-distance desert travel because they could carry loads, endure harsh conditions, and move across dry landscapes better than many other pack animals. Their importance helped reshape trade, herding, warfare, and communication across desert regions. A sleeping camp without animals would be quieter, perhaps, but in many traditional settings it would also be less secure, less mobile, and far less alive. You begin to separate sounds into categories: heavy breathing, harmless, rope creaking, probably harmless, hoof scraping, worth noticing, but not alarming, sudden frantic movement, definitely worth noticing, a soft patter near the food area, suspicious, a beetle walking over dry leaves, apparently capable of sounding like a burglar with 6 legs and a tiny backpack. The mind, especially at night, enjoys exaggerating. A pebble rolls, and your imagination hires a full orchestra. Someone nearby whispers that foxes sometimes circle camps, drawn by scraps or smells. In the Sahara, the fennec fox is famous for its huge ears, which help release heat and detect prey moving under sand. You imagine one sitting beyond the dim light, listening to the entire camp with satellite dish ears. Judging your blanket technique, it is probably not interested in you. It wants crumbs, insects, or small animals, still that you tuck the food covering more tightly, because confidence is nice but lids are better. A quirky tidbit scuttles into the lesson on tiny feet darkling beetles in some deserts perform little head-down stances, angling their bodies in ways that help them manage moisture or heat depending on species and environment. Some Namib desert beetles are especially famous for collecting fog moisture on their bodies. Though not every beetle is a miniature water engineer, the desert is full of specialists. You, meanwhile, are still trying to keep sand out of one sock. Nature can be humbling like that. The animals near camp create a strange kind of comfort. At first, every sound wakes you. Then, gradually, the repeated noises become part of the bedding of the night. The camel chewing returns, the goat rope creaks, a moth taps once near the lantern, then disappears. The sounds prove the camp is not sealed away from the world, it is included in it. The secret is learning which noises belong and which noises interrupt the pattern. Historians still argue whether ancient desert travellers feared animal threats more than thirst, weather, raiders, or losing the route. The answer depends on the place and period, of course, and on the animal. Lions once lived across parts of North Africa and the Middle East in ranges far wider than today, while wolves, hyenas, snakes, scorpions, and smaller creatures all shaped local caution. Yet most nights in most camps were probably governed less by dramatic attack and more by practical vigilance. Shake the bedding, store the food and watch the animals and keep the fire safe. Do not step barefoot into darkness unless you enjoy making poor decisions with confidence. You are taught to check your shoes, not dramatically. No one gives a speech. You simply turn each shoe upside down and tap it. This is one of those small desert habits that look silly until the day it is not silly at all. Scorpions, spiders, and other small creatures may seek shelter in cool, dark spaces. Your boot is, to them, a charming cave with modern stitching. You respect their real estate interests from a distance. The camp animals are checked too. A tether is adjusted. A load saddle is moved away from a goat that has decided it might chew history into pieces. A camel bell is wrapped or softened so it does not ring all night. Bells can help locate animals, but a bell near your head at midnight is less a helpful device and more a tiny metal philosopher asking why you ever wanted sleep. Someone murmurs to the animals as they settle them. The tone is calm, practical, almost affectionate without being sentimental. You notice how much knowledge sits in these gestures. People who live with working animals read ears, breath, posture, chewing, stamping, and the direction of attention. A camel that lifts its head may be reacting to scent, sound, discomfort, or sheer camel drama. A goat tugging against rope may be hungry, tangled, or simply committed to chaos. Animals extend the senses of the camp. They hear and smell what you cannot. They also create chores, smells, arguments, and surprise chewing, because no partnership is perfect. Somewhere outside the shelter, a small creature runs over the sand with a sound like dry fingers brushing paper. Your body stiffens, then the sound continues away. Harmless and busy, you exhale. The desert has many lives moving through it, and most of them do not care about your personal bedtime journey. This is a relief. Not everything in the dark is a message for you. Some of it is just a beetle being late to whatever beetles attend. The night becomes easier once you stop demanding total sense. Remote camps do not offer stillsamhet as emptiness. They offer a living quiet filled with patterns, chewed and creak, hush, a click, breath, pause as you lie still and let the sounds arrange themselves. The animals nearby become part of the camp's protection and its personality, part alarm system, part nuisance, part lullaby. The camel sighs again, magnificent and unimpressed. You accept its judgment. You pull the blanket close, keep your shoes within reach, and let the small lives of the desert continue around you, busy and soft beneath the stars. You lie back and the sky opens so widely above you that for a moment your mind forgets what a ceiling is. There are stars near the horizon, stars overhead, stars clustered thickly in pale dust, stars so sharp they seem newly made. The darkness is not empty, it is crowded with light. You try to find a familiar constellation and immediately become the kind of person who points confidently at nothing. The desert accepts this. The stars have endured thousands of years of human misidentification and will probably survive your contribution. The air has cleared into a cool transparency. Without the glare of towns or roads, the night becomes deep enough to show what city skies politely hide. The Milky Way stretches across the darkness like spilled flour, which feels appropriate given the amount of breadcrumb still trying to colonize your sleeve. You breathe slowly, watching the band of light. Ancient travellers watched it too, though not as decoration alone. In deserts where paths could vanish under wind and distance, stars help guide movement, measure time, and steady the mind. The mainstream historical fact is simple and beautiful long before modern navigation tools. Many desert travellers use the stars, the sun, landmarks, wind patterns, and inherited route knowledge to cross vast dry regions in the Arabian Peninsula, the Sahara, the Sinai, and other desert landscapes. Skilled guides could use celestial cues alongside tracks, wells, mountain shapes, and memory. The stars were not a romantic extra, they were part of the map, a glittering, inconveniently distant map. Yes, but still useful. Beautiful. You listen as someone names a star in a language you do not fully understand. The name arrives softly, carried through the cool air. Many star names used in modern astronomy have Arabic roots, a reminder of the important work of medieval Islamic astronomers who preserved, expanded, and refined knowledge of the heavens. You look up with new respect and slightly less confidence. Somewhere above you are names shaped by shepherds, sailors, scholars, poets, and mathematicians. Somewhere up there is also whatever you were calling the bright one near the other bright one, which may not enter the official record. A quirky tidbit settles beside you in some traditions. The rising or setting of certain stars was linked to seasonal change, animal movement, planting times, or expected weather. Even where farming was limited, star calendars could help communities anticipate heat, cold, winds, or the arrival of brief useful rains. This does not mean the stars caused the weather like tiny sparkling managers. It means people watched patterns with great attention. The sky became a clock, a calendar, and occasionally a source of arguments between elders who remembered last year differently. You begin to notice time passing through the stars. They do not seem to move if you stare for a minute, but over longer stretches their positions shift. The sky is turning, or rather, Sol, Earth is turning beneath it, carrying you through darkness with all the grace of a sleeping animal rolling over. You feel very small, but not unpleasantly so. Smallness in the desert can be restful. There is no need to be the main character when the Milky Way is doing this much production work overhead. Historians still argue whether desert navigation depended more on specialist guides or on widespread shared knowledge among ordinary travellers. Some journeys surely required experts, especially across difficult stretches where wells were far apart and landmarks subtle. Yet many herders, traders, pilgrims, and local travellers held practical knowledge passed through families and communities. The debate matters because it changes how you imagine movement in the desert. Was the route guarded by rare masters or carried by many minds at once under this scheme? Both possibilities feel reasonable. You turn your head and the camp appears smaller than ever. The tents are low, dark shapes. The animals are folded into shadow. The last ember glows faintly, dimmer than the stars, which must be humbling for the fire. The stars offer a different kind of comfort than flame. Fire gathers people inward. Stars loosen the edges of the self. They do not warm your hands, but they cool your thoughts. They remind you that worry is often just the mind making a tent out of smoke. You think of caravans moving by night to avoid heat, their bells muffled or ringing softly, their feet pressing into cold sand. Night travel could be safer for temperature and sometimes easier for animals, though it carried its own risks. The stars above those travellers were not perfectly fixed from night to night in the way a painted ceiling would be. They rose, set, shifted with seasons, and demanded familiarity. Imagine planning your journey by lights that move, vanish in clouds, and require you to know the year's rhythm. Your navigation application once panicked in a parking garage, so perhaps humility is appropriate. A faint meteor scratches across the sky and disappears. You almost ask whether anyone saw it, then decide not to disturb the quiet. Falling stars have gathered wishes, omens, explanations, and superstitions across many cultures. The scientific explanation is cleaner bits of dust or rock burning through the atmosphere. Still, the old wonder remains. A tiny thing dies in brightness, and every human nearby becomes poetic for at least half a second. Even the camel seems to pause, though it may simply be chewing with dramatic timing. The stars also help with sleep, by giving the mind somewhere vast and gentle to go. Instead of circling your private worries, your attention drifts outward. You trace a line between points of light. You lose the line. You begin again. There is no failure in this. The sky is not testing you. It is simply there, enormous and patient, repeating its slow movements without needing applause. Your eyelids lower, then lift, then lower again. The cool air slips across your face. The blanket holds your warmth around you. The camp breathes softly above you. The constellations keep their old, wandering order. The secret of stars as a blanket is not that they cover you like cloth. They cover the restless parts of your mind. They make loneliness feel shared with every traveller who's ever looked up from sand. Stone, camel saddle, folded mat, or cold ground and thought. Quietly, I am still here. You let that thought settle. The sky glitters. Your breathing slows. The desert night becomes less like distance and more like a wide, dark room made for rest. The cold arrives with no announcement, which feels a little unfair after the sun spent the day being so loud about its opinions. At first, the air merely cools your cheeks, then it slips beneath the edge of your blanket, touches your ankles, and behaves as if it has been invited. You pull the wool closer. The desert sky remains clear and glittering, beautiful in the way a marble floor is beautiful until you step on it barefoot at dawn. The heat has gone upward, outward, away, leaving the ground and air to practice their nighttime personality. You had expected relief from the day's furnace, and relief did come. For a while, the coolness felt luxurious. Then it kept going. The desert apparently has no middle setting. It moves from roasting tray to pantry shelf with impressive confidence. You tuck your knees slightly, not enough to look dramatic, just enough to conserve warmth and maintain the illusion that you planned this. Somewhere nearby, a camel folds deeper into itself, wearing its own excellent coat and looking smugger without even trying. The reason for the chill is written in the dry air. Deserts often lose heat quickly at night because clear skies allow warmth to radiate away from the ground, while low humidity means there is less water vapour to trap that warmth near the surface. During the day, sunlight pours down with little cloud cover. At night, the same open sky becomes a doorway for heat to escape. The mainstream historical fact is practical, and old desert travellers have long planned not only for daytime heat, but also for nighttime cold, carrying wool cloaks, layered garments, blankets, and wind protection to survive the full daily swing. You begin to respect wool. Wool does not seem glamorous when it is folded in a dusty pile, smelling faintly of animal and smoke, but once the temperature drops, it becomes the most intelligent object in your life. Wool fibres can trap insulating air and still provide warmth even when slightly damp. A woven cloak, blanket, or rug can serve as bedding. Coat, door flap, saddle covering, shade, and emergency dignity when you realise your modern jacket is mostly decorative. The desert loves multi-purpose items. It has little patience for luggage that only does one thing and then asks for a special pocket. You add a layer before the cold becomes sharp. This is another secret. You do not wait until you are shivering. Shivering is your body filing a complaint. Better to dress while warmth is still inside you. A head covering helps. Dry socks help. Loose layers trap air better than tight ones. You learn to protect wrists, neck, and ankles. Those small gates through which warmth seems to escape while laughing quietly. You're not trying to become fashionable. You are trying to become a bundled object with a pulse. A quirky tidbit comes wrapped in old cloth. Some desert peoples used heavy outer cloaks that worked against both heat and cold, shielding the body from sun by day and trapping warmth by night. The same garment could look like too much fabric to an outsider, until that outsider experienced a desert night and suddenly developed deep respect for everyone who looked like a walking blanket. Even the colour, weave, and looseness of clothing could matter. A robe is not laziness. It is climate engineering with sleeves. The ground beneath you matters more now. During the day, it held heat. As the night deepens, it becomes a thief. Without a mat, rug, hide, or raised bedding, your body loses warmth into the earth. You shift and feel the difference where the padding is thicker. A second folded layer beneath your hips becomes treasure. The blanket above you has got only half the story. The layer under you is the quiet guardian. Many cold sleepers blame the air, when the ground is the one calmly stealing from below like a very patient accountant. Historians still argue whether certain desert clothing traditions develop mainly for protection from temperature extremes, modesty codes, social identity, available fibers, or the demands of long-distance travel. The answer, like most useful answers, is probably tangled. Clothing can signal tribe, status, gender, occupation, faith, and region one, while still keeping sand off your neck and cold from your ribs. A blanket may be practical, symbolic, inherited, traded, patched, and loved all at once. Human things rarely do only one job. You listen to the fabric around camp respond to the cold. Ropes tighten slightly. Tent panels stiffen. Blankets rustle as people turn. Someone coughs once, then settles. The air smells cleaner now, almost metallic, with a faint trace of ash from the lowered fire. Stars sharpen, sounds travel farther. You can hear a distant animal call, thin and brief, then nothing. Cold makes the desert feel larger, but also more precise. Your breath warms the edge of your covering. You resist the tempting but foolish urge to tuck your whole face under the blanket forever. A little opening keeps the air fresher and the fabric less damp. This is the sort of detail no one writes on heroic travel posters. Leave a breathing gap, or wake up inside a small humid cave of your own making. Adventure is mostly maintenance with dramatic lighting. In some camps, people sleep close enough to share warmth without crowding. In others, family groups arrange bedding according to custom, age, and privacy. Animals may be kept near enough to guard, warmed or monitor, but not so near that hooves, smells, and chewing become the main event. The cold changes the geometry of camp. Places that felt open earlier now feel too exposed. Sheltered corners become desirable. The body turns instinctively away from wind. Knees bend. Hands disappear into sleeve. Everyone becomes rounder. You notice that the cold does not prevent sleep once you accept it early. It is the surprise that wakes people. The person who goes to bed warm, lightly covered, and overconfident becomes the person fumbling angrily in darkness for missing layers. The person who prepares slowly can soften into the chill. Wool above, mat below, shoes close, water covered, head warm, edges tucked. The body receives these signals and begins to believe it is safe. The desert night continues its quiet cooling. You lie still, not perfectly warm, but warm enough. That phrase feels important. Warm enough is a deep kind of comfort, less demanding than luxury. Your nose is cool, your feet are protected, your shoulders rest inside the blanket's weight, the stars glitter with icy patience overhead, while the sand beneath you gives up the last remembered warmth of the day. The secret of sleeping through desert cold is not defeating it. It is preparing before it fully arrives, then letting its clean silver hush carry you inward, layer by layer, until your thoughts slow like embers under ash. Sand enters your life with the confidence of a relative who was not invited but somehow has a key. It is in the fold of your blanket, along the seam of your sleeve, inside the rim of your cup, under one fingernail, and, most mysteriously, somewhere near your ear, even though you have made no decision involving your ear. You brush it away, more arrives, you brush again. The desert watches this performance with ancient patience, because the desert invented persistence long before humans invented housekeeping. You begin by accepting the main truth. Keeping sand out completely is impossible. Keeping sand out enough is the art. This is not defeat, it is strategy. A remote desert camp does not chase perfect cleanliness, because perfect cleanliness would require sealed walls, hard floors, endless water, and a personality disorder involving brooms. Instead, the camp separates zones. Sleeping things stay covered, cooking things stay raised or wrapped, footwear stays near the entrance. Dusty outer garments do not wander freely into bedding like honoured guests. The mainstream historical fact is practical and global desert travellers have long used mats, rugs, saddlebags, covered baskets, leather pouches, woven sacks, and lidded containers to protect food, tools, and bedding from dust and grit. Storage is not decoration here, it is survival housekeeping. A single grain of sand in bread is merely annoying. A handful in flour, water, or medicine can become a real problem. A camp that covers and ties its belongings sleeps better because it does not wake up to find the desert has personally seasoned everything. You shake your blanket before lying down, but not wildly. Wild shaking only relocates sand from one problem to another, usually into the face of someone nearby, who then becomes very polite in a dangerous way. You lift, flick, fold, and let the wind take what it can. The movement is small and practiced. The blanket is then rolled inward from the clean side, not dragged through the ground like a dramatic carpet in a royal procession. You are beginning to understand that desert cleanliness is less about scrubbing and more about choreography. Your shoes receive special attention. You place them with the openings downward or tucked partly beneath the cloth, depending on conditions, so they collect less sand and fewer curious residents. Socks are rolled inside your bedding, not left out of jeans off outside to become too small dunes with elastic. You brush your feet before entering the sleeping place. This simple gesture feels almost ceremonial. Foot, hand, ankle, toe, other foot. A little sand comes off, not all, enough. You are not preparing for surgeries, you are reducing future misery. A quirky tidbit comes from the old habit of using sand itself as part of cleaning. In many dry places, sand or fine ash could be used to scour pots when water was too precious to spend freely. This feels ridiculous at first. Using sand to clean in a place where sand is the villain sounds like hiring a fox to manage chicken security. Yet dry grit can remove grease and residue from metal or clay before a final wipe. The desert is full of these contradictions. The nuisance becomes the tool, because complaining is rarely more useful than adaptation. Historians still argue whether ancient desert camps left so little domestic evidence because people cleaned carefully, travelled lightly, reused materials intensely, or because wind and sand scattered the traces. A campsite can vanish quickly under moving grains. A hearth may remain, a broken bead may wait, a shard may lodge under gravel, but cloth, crumbs, scraps, and footprints are easily erased. The desert can be both archivist and thief, preserving some things for centuries while swallowing last night's mess by breakfast. You take care with food, bread stays wrapped, dates remain covered, grain sacks are tied tight, cooking pots are turned upside down or covered with lids, a cloth over a bowl is weighted with a pebble, because the wind loves stealing cloth with the glee of a mischievous child. You do not leave sweetness exposed. Ants, beetles, mice, and other small opportunists may be attracted by scent. The desert may look empty, but every crumb sends out invitations. Tiny guests are famously bad at asking before entering. Your hair becomes a separate negotiation. A scarf, cap, or cloth tied around the head reduces the amount of dust that finds its way into your scalp. It also keeps warmth in, blocks wind, and saves you from waking with hair shaped like a frightened shrub. People have wrapped heads and faces in desert regions for many reasons, including sun protection, dust protection, warmth, modesty, and identity. A headcloth is not merely picturesque. It is a portable boundary between you and a landscape determined to exfoliate you for free. The bedding is raised slightly where possible, or layered on mats that can be shaken. Some camps use woven palm mats, reed mats, rugs, hides, or modern ground sheets. The principle remains the same: create a barrier. Keep the clean side inward, fold edges under. Do not step on bedding with an outdoor feet unless you enjoy sleeping in a miniature quarry. You arrange your blanket and feel absurd satisfaction when the corners stay neat. This, too, is part of sleeping. Order outside the mind invites order inside it. The wind changes direction and sends a low drift sliding across the ground. You can hear it before you feel it. A faint, dry whisper like paper being rubbed together. Sand gathers against stones, tent edges, bags, and sleeping mats. Anything left flat becomes a collection tray. Anything with a lip becomes a tiny dune farm. Someone checks the windward side of the shelter and presses sand over a loose flap. The movement stops the draft, and the grains pile outside instead of inside. A small victory. No one cheers, because desert victories are often quiet and slightly dusty. You learn not to fight every grain. That way lies madness. One grain in the blanket can be brushed away. A few on the mat can be ignored. Sand in the mouth is unacceptable. Sand in the boot is negotiable. Sand in the food is tragic. And sand in the ear is proof that the universe has a sense of humour with questionable boundaries. You laugh softly because the alternative is taking the desert personally. And the desert is much too large for that argument. At last, your sleeping place is not clean in the city sense. It is desert clean, food protected, bedding shaken, shoes checked, water sealed, hair covered, outer layers set aside, mat edges tucked. The air still carries dust, and the floor is literally made of broken stone. But the little human nest has been defended enough. The secret of keeping sand out is not purity, it is patience, repetition, and accepting that comfort is built by reducing irritation until the body stops noticing the rest. You lie down carefully, avoiding one suspicious gritty fold, and the camp settles around you, brushed, covered, tied, and quietly ready for sleep. The first story begins so quietly that you almost miss the moment when ordinary talk becomes something older. A hand lifts near the fading coals, a voice lowers, someone mentions a journey, a well, a season when the wind came early, a guide who trusted the wrong ridge, a camel that returned alone with its saddle hanging crooked and its expression, apparently completely innocent. Around the camp, bodies shift closer without anyone announcing it. Stories do not need a stage here. They only need darkness, listeners, and enough warmth for people to forget how tired their knees are. You listen with your blanket drawn around your shoulders, feeling the day loosen its last grip. Storytelling in a desert camp is not entertainment added after the important work. It is part of the work. A tale can carry root knowledge, warnings, family memory, jokes, lore, faith, reputation, and the comforting proof that others have crossed this loneliness and lived to complain about it. The mainstream historical fact is plain. Oral storytelling has been central in many nomadic and desert societies. Preserving history, genealogy, practical advice, poetry, and moral lessons where written records were often less important than living memory. The speaker describes a line of stones that once marked a path. He tells how travellers mistook a shadowed ridge for another ridge and lost a day circling back. The listeners nod, not with dramatic fear, but with recognition. A story about a mistake is safer than making the mistake yourself. It is a classroom disguised as a bedtime murmur. You begin to suspect that many old stories survived because they were useful, and usefulness, when wrapped in humour, travels farther than a lecture. This is tragic news for lectures, but excellent news for listeners trying to stay awake just long enough to learn something. A joke follows, dry as the sand. A man in the tale boasts that he can find any well by smell alone. After hours of wandering, he finds only his own cooking pot. Everyone laughs softly. You laugh too, or you. a little late. Because desert humour often lands slowly, like a camel deciding whether to sit. The joke is gentle, but it does what jokes do best in hard places. It cuts pride down to sleeping size. It reminds everyone that confidence is useful until it becomes a map drawn by an idiot. Then another voice adds a legend about a dune that sings. This is not entirely fantasy. Some dunes in deserts around the world can produce deep humming or booming sounds when dry sand grains slide together under the right conditions. People have explained those sounds in many ways, from spirits to buried cities to the desert speaking in its sleep. The quirky tidbit feels perfect for night. A dune can sometimes sound like a distant drum, a low note from the earth, as if the sand has a secret instrument hidden inside it. You listen to the stillness and feel half disappointed, half relieved, that tonight's dune is not performing. Historians still argue whether many desert legends began mainly as practical warnings, spiritual explanations, entertainment, or memory devices tied to real places. A tale of a haunted past might keep children from wandering. A story of a generous stranger might teach hospitality. A legend of a hidden well might preserve knowledge through metaphor. Or perhaps people simply enjoy making the night more interesting, because a completely factual evening can be a bit thin after supper. The boundary between instruction and imagination is not a wall. In firelight, it is more like a veil. A poem comes next, recited from memory. You may not understand every word, but the rhythm carries meaning of its own. In Arabic-speaking desert cultures, poetry has long held enormous prestige, especially among Bedouin communities, where verses could praise, mock, mourn, remember, and negotiate status. Words travel lightly, and a good poem needs no pack animal. A singer may forget a saddle strap, but a verse can cross generations if enough tongues keep it alive. You settle deeper, letting the cadence wash through you, even when the meaning escapes like water through fingers. Someone mentions an ancestor whose judgment settled a dispute over grazing. Someone else corrects a detail. A brief argument blooms, polite but sharp, over whether the ancestor had 2 sons or 3, whether the dry season lasted 7 months or nearly 9, whether the old route passed north of the Black Rocks or closer to the Salt Flat. Memory here is communal, and therefore lively. Nobody has a search engine. Everyone has an aunt who remembers differently. This is perhaps more dangerous. The corrections do not spoil the mood, they thicken it. You realize that stories are not frozen objects. They are tended like small fires. Each teller adds a twig, removes smoke, adjusts the shape. The important pieces remain warm, the less important pieces wander. Sometimes the wandering parts are the most fun. One listener insists that a camel in an old tale learned to untie knots. Another says no camel is that clever. A third says all camels are clever when the goal is causing inconvenience. The matter is settled by laughter, which is to say, not settled at all. Beyond the circle, the darkness presses close, but the stories push it back without brightness. You notice how your mind changes. Earlier, the vast desert could make thoughts scatter. Now the tales give them a path, a beginning, a turn, a warning, a joke, a returner. The body likes rhythm, and narrative is rhythm with people in it. Your breathing begins to match the speaker's pauses. You can feel sleep approaching, not suddenly, but like a cautious guest who has finally decided the room is safe. A final tale is told almost in a whisper. It concerns a traveller who refuses to sleep because he fears missing danger. He stays awake night after night until he mistakes a bush for a raider, a goat for a demon, and his own blanket for a snake. At last, exhausted, he sleeps through an entire peaceful night and wakes embarrassed but alive. The moral is not subtle, which is kind of it. A tired mind invents more trouble than the dark provides. You appreciate this message while pretending it is meant for someone else. The coals dim further. Voices thin into murmurs. Stories do not end so much as dissolve. A last chuckle fades. A last correction is postponed to some future evening when everyone can be wrong again with renewed energy. You carry the tales into your bedding, where they become softer, less detailed, more like shapes than words. The singing dune, the foolish boaster, the knot-tying camel, the sleepless traveller, all drift together beneath the stars. The secret of stories before sleep is that they make a remote camp feel inhabited by more than bodies. It fills with memory, warning, humour, and the gentle company of people who are not here, yet somehow sit beside you in the dark. The talking fades until the quiet has room to stand up. At first it feels pleasant, like the moment after a door closes on a noisy room. Then it grows wider. The desert does not become silent in a simple way. It becomes so spacious that every tiny sound gains importance. Your blanket whispers when you move, a rope touches a pole, a grain of sand slides against another grain, or at least your imagination claims it does. Somewhere in the dark, an animal breathes, and your mind immediately opens an investigation with no evidence and far too much enthusiasm. This is the strange part of remote desert sleep. The body may be tired, fed, warm, and sheltered, yet the mind can remain watchful. It has been trained by cities to expect patterns, engines, voices, distant music, doors, pipes, the small electric hum of rooms that think they are modern. Here, those familiar layers are gone. The absence of noise becomes its own presence. You lie still and realize that quiet is not empty. Quiet is a mirror, and it reflects whatever you brought with you, including every unfinished thought that apparently packed itself without permission. The mainstream historical fact is not dramatic, but it matters. Desert travelers often required strong group discipline at night, with camps relying on watchfulness, animal awareness, routines, and shared expectations to manage danger and uncertainty. People did not simply lie down anywhere and hope for the best. They created social patterns around rest. Someone might keep watch. Animals might be placed where movement would be noticed. Fires might be banked. Gear might be arranged for quick departure. Sleep was personal, but safety was collective. You remind yourself that the camp has already done its work. The place has been chosen. The shelter has been set. The food is covered. The animals are settled. The fire is safe. The water is protected. Your shoes await you. Yet the nervous mind does not always accept a checklist. It prefers to ask, yes, but what about the mysterious sound from the left? What about the coal patch near your elbow? What about the possibility that the universe has scheduled a surprise? This is why the mind should not be allowed to manage travel alone. It would hold meetings until sunrise. A faint breeze crosses the tent skin. The fabric answers with a soft ripple. You name the sound, cloth, the rope taps. You name it, rope. A camel exhales. Camel, your own stomach makes a small, deeply unheroic noise. You name that too, though perhaps not aloud. Naming sounds becomes a way to calm the body. The unknown shrinks when given ordinary words. Not threat, not omen, not ancient curse rising from the dunes because you forgot to properly admire the kettle. Just cloth, rope, animal, body, wind. A quirky tidbit arrives from the world of perception in very quiet places. Some people become more aware of their own internal sounds, such as heartbeat, breathing, or the faint ringing that busy environments usually cover. The remote desert does not add noise so much as remove distractions. Suddenly, you're living inside the instrument of yourself, and it's not always tuned for relaxation. Your heartbeat seems louder, your breath has texture, even swallowing becomes an event. Congratulations. You are the percussion section. Historians still argue whether descriptions of desert silence in travel writing reveal more about the landscape itself or about outsiders encountering unfamiliar emptiness. People raised in desert environments may hear information where strangers hear nothing. A quiet night can speak of wind direction, animal distance, human movement, weather changes, and the condition of camp. So when old travellers describe the desert as blank or dead, they may be revealing their own inexperience. The desert is not mute, it is simply not performing in your preferred genre. You let that idea settle. Perhaps the quiet is not against you. Perhaps it is a language you only partly understand. Your task is not to solve it all tonight. Your task is to stop translating every sound into worry. You breathe in slowly through the nose, feeling cool air. You breathe out longer, letting the chest soften. The blanket rises and falls. The dark holds steady. Nothing demands your cleverness. This is a great relief. Since cleverness at midnight tends to produce very poor theories, the camp teaches rest through repetition. Each time your mind leaps toward alarm, you bring it back to the body, the weight of wool, the firmness of the mat, the covered feet, the smell of ash, the faint sweetness left from tea, the tiny grit at the edge of your sleeve. Annoying but not important. You do not need to feel perfectly calm. Perfect calm is another one of those goals that keeps people awake. You only need to become calm enough. Beyond the shelter, the desert spreads in every direction, and that vastness can tug at old instincts. Humans are social animals. A remote camp reminds you how much comfort usually comes from walls, neighbours, lamps, and predictable noise. Without those, the imagination may start building dangers from shadows, yet the same vastness can also loosen the grip of ordinary worries. Deadlines, messages, errands, opinions, bills, all of them seem faintly absurd out here. The desert gives your anxieties no furniture to sit on. You try counting breaths, not as a command, but as a slow path. One breath enters, one breath leaves. The wind crosses the fabric, a camel shifts, a far insect clicks. The sounds no longer arrive like interruptions, they become beads on a string. Your mind touches each one and moves on. This is how the silence changes. It does not become smaller. You become less startled by its size. There is a deep comfort in realizing that people have slept under such conditions for ages, without needing the world to be quiet in the way bedrooms are quiet. Soldiers, herders, pilgrims, traders, refugees, hunters, guides, families, and wanderers have all negotiated sleep in exposed places. Some nights were fearful, some were ordinary. Many were probably boring, which is the highest compliment a dangerous landscape can receive. A boring night means the ropes held, the animals stayed, the wind behaved, and nobody had to become legendary. Your eyelids lower. The nervous mind makes one more attempt, offering a vague concern with no clear subject. You decline politely, not now. The quiet does not vanish, but it stops pressing so hard and becomes a broad, borrowed dark cushion around the camp. You're not alone in it. You're among sleeping people, resting animals, banked embers, covered bowls, tied ropes, folded cloth, and countless grains of sand doing absolutely nothing that requires your supervision. The secret of silence is not forcing the mind to go blank. The mind is not a tent lamp you can simply turn down, although that would be convenient and probably expensive. The secret is letting the quiet become familiar enough that the body believes it. Cloth, rope, breath, wind, again and again. The desert remains enormous, but your resting place becomes known. Your thoughts thin, your shoulders sink. The silence, once too large, now begins to carry you. The wind begins as a suggestion. A faint pressure touches the shelter wall, pauses, then returns with more confidence. The fabric tightens. A rope gives a small complaint. Sand moves outside in a dry whisper, sliding over itself like 1,000 tiny secrets changing places. You open your eyes, not fully awake, but awake enough for the body to ask whether this is normal. The camp does not panic. That is the first lesson. The desert may become dramatic, but the people who sleep in it try very hard not to audition for the drama. A hand reaches from a nearby bedroll and presses a blanket edge flat. Someone else rises with the slow efficiency of a person who has done this many times and would prefer not to discuss it at length. Pegs are checked, loose cloth is tucked, a cooking pot is moved into shelter, bags are turned so their openings face away from the gusts. The fire is only ash now, safely quiet. But even ash can travel if the wind becomes playful. Nothing happens quickly enough to frighten you. Everything happens steadily enough to reassure you. The mainstream historical fact is written in every movement. Dust storms and strong desert winds have shaped travel, camp design, route planning, and survival across arid regions for centuries. In the Sahara, the harmattan can carry dry, dusty air across huge distances. In the Middle East, shamal winds can bring dust and reduce visibility. Other deserts have their own wind names, their own tempers, their own local reputations. A traveller who ignores wind is not being brave. That traveller is simply volunteering to become a cautionary tale with itchy eyes. The gust strengthens. The tense skin pulses inward, then relaxes. You hear grains strike the fabric, soft at first, then more insistent, like rain made of powdered stone. It is oddly soothing until you remember that rain does not usually try to enter through every seam. You pull your scarf over your nose and mouth. This is not elegant, but elegance has retired for the night. Breathing through cloth helps reduce dust. Keeping eyes partly closed helps. Turning away from the wind helps. Becoming a wrapped bundle of patient resignation helps most of all. A quirky tidbit rides in with the grit. Some dust from the Sahara crosses the Atlantic Ocean and reaches the Amazon basin. Carrying minerals that can help fertilize distant soils, the same fine particles that make you blink like a sleepy lizard may travel between continents and feed forests far away. This is beautiful, inconvenient, and slightly insulting. Apparently the sand in your blanket may have international ambitions. You try to appreciate the planetary system while also wishing the planetary system would stay out of your nose. Historians still argue whether certain ancient desert route interruptions described in chronicles were caused mainly by sandstorms, political conflict, water shortages, disease among animals, or poor planning, later blamed on weather. Wind makes a convenient villain. It leaves few signatures and accepts all accusations with a shrug. Yet real storms could halt caravans, bury tracks, hide landmarks, separate animals, and turn familiar country strange within minutes. A camp that handles wind calmly preserves not only comfort, but direction, supplies, and morale. The guide lowers one side of the shelter. A flap is tied more tightly. A saddlebag becomes a weight. You notice how objects transform under pressure. A bag is not just storage, it is ballast. A blanket is not just warmth, it is a seal. A walking stick is not just support, it is a pole, a hook, a tool for pulling cloth without stepping into the full blast. In a remote camp, usefulness multiplies in bad weather. Nothing likes to remain only itself. The wind finds a loose corner and snaps it once. Everyone hears it. Nobody lectures the corner. Someone crawls over, catches the edge, and pins it beneath sand and stone. You admire this calm response because your instinct would have been to sit upright and ask the night why it was doing this personally. The desert is not personal. That is both comforting and mildly disappointing. It will not apologize. It will not explain. It will simply continue being physics with scenery. Inside your covering, you make your own small adjustments. You roll away from the draft. You keep your water container upright and sealed. You move your shoes closer, not because you plan to leave, but because a windblown camp can relocate small objects with surprising creativity. You protect your face, you keep your breathing slow, and the secret in wind is to reduce surfaces, Reduce openings, reduce panic. Panic flaps worse than canvas. A louder gust passes through, and the shelter hums, not a musical hum, not exactly, more like a low animal sound made by cloth. Rope, air and strain. You feel it in your ribs, then it fades. The pause afterward is enormous. You wait for the next gust, and it comes, smaller, then another, rougher. Wind has rhythm, though not always manners. You begin to hear the pattern push, rattle, hiss, settle, push, rattle, hiss, settle. The repetition gives your mind something to hold. In some camps, people might wake fully and wait out a storm sitting together, faces covered, backs turned, lamps protected. In others, if the shelter holds and the wind remains manageable, they sleep through what would keep a newcomer wide awake and composing farewell letters in their imagination. Experience changes the meaning of sound. A flapping edge can say danger, or it can say tighten that rope when the gust passes. The second translation is better for rest. Sand creeps under one side of the mat. You feel the slight lift against your hip. It is annoying, not dangerous. You press the bedding down and let the weight of your body do some of the work. The air inside smells dusty now, dry and mineral, with only a faint memory of smoke and tea beneath it. Your teeth feel gritty. This is not your favourite feature of the landscape. Still, the bedding holds, the roof holds, the camp holds, the storm remains outside enough. The wind slowly spends itself, not completely listen. It continues in smaller breaths, wandering around the shelter, testing edges without much conviction. The fabric no longer snaps, it shakes. Someone ties one final knot, then returns to their blanket. A camel complains once, deeply, as if submitting a formal review of the weather. You agree with the camel. The weather receives 2 stars for atmosphere, 1 star for comfort, and no recommendation for guests with clean hair. Patience becomes the tool that outlasts all the others. You cannot hurry a gust past the camp. You cannot negotiate with dust. You cannot command the dunes to remain where they were placed, which is rude of them but historically consistent. You can only prepare, wait, adjust, and wait again. The secret of storms and winds is not heroic endurance. It is small, boring persistence. Tuck the edge, cover the face, keep the water closed, listen for change, trust the knots. Let the weather move through its restless moods while you remain low, wrapped, and steady. The last grains whisper across the shelter wall like a fading hand. Your eyes close. The wind is still there, but it has become part of the night's breathing. You're dusty. Yes, you're not perfectly comfortable. No. But you're safe enough, warm enough, sheltered enough, and tired enough for sleep to return. Carrying patience with it like a soft weight laid carefully over the heart. The first light does not arrive as a sunrise. It arrives as a loosening of darkness, a pale blue thinning along the edge of the world. You wake before the sun itself appears. Not because an alarm has shouted at you, but because the camp has begun to stir in tiny, respectful ways. A blanket shifts, a kettle is lifted, a rope is untied. Somewhere outside, a camel makes a low sound that suggests it has also awakened, although perhaps against its better judgment. The air is cold enough to sharpen your nose, and the sand has the calm, untouched look of something that has been quietly rearranging itself all night. You stay still for a moment, letting your eyes adjust. The stars are fading, but not gone. The brightest ones cling to the upper sky while the east grows lighter. This hour belongs to grey shapes and half-seen forms. Tents are not yet brown or black, only darker shadows against lighter sand. Bedrolls are soft mounds. People are silhouettes. The world feels unfinished, like a sketch before colour returns. It is one of the reasons desert travellers often begin early. The coolness is precious, and wasting it would be like throwing away shade, which even your sleepiest self understands as unwise. The mainstream historical fact comes with the dawn itself. Many desert journeys traditionally began before or near sunrise, so travellers could use the coolest hours of the day, spare animals from harsh heat, and cover distance before the sun became punishing. Whether crossing gravel plains, salt flats, dunes, or stony tracks, movement was often timed around temperature. The desert clock is not made of numbers first. It is made of light, heat, shadow, thirst, and the endurance of animals and people. You sit up slowly. Fast movement in morning cold feels unnecessary, and also slightly rude to your spine. Your blanket falls from your shoulders, and the air immediately tries to claim your warmth. You pull the cloth back and begin the small procedure of becoming human again. Fingers flex, feet search for socks, shoes are tapped and checked before being worn. This habit is no longer strange. It is simply what a sensible creature does before placing toes into dark spaces. You're evolving. Very slowly, but still we must celebrate what we can. The ground around the camp has changed. Night wind has softened footprints, sharpened little ridges, and laid thin veils of sand against bags and stones. Tracks cross the open patches. Some are from camp animals, some belong to smaller wanderers who passed while you slept. A beetle trail loops near a cooking area, then vanishes under a ripple. A fox or the small canid may have left neat prints beyond the sleeping places, light and purposeful. You look at them with the quiet thrill of discovering that while you were unconscious, the desert held a tiny night shift. A quirky tidbit lies in those morning tracks. Skilled trackers in desert regions can sometimes tell not only what animal passed, but how recently, how fast, and in which direction, using the sharpness of edges, wind disturbance, overlapping prints, and moisture in the sand. To you, the tracks say, something with feet existed. To a practiced guide, they may say, a goat wandered, a beetle crossed, a fox inspected the area, and you dragged your blanket like a tired royal. The desert records everything briefly, then edits without mercy. Historians still argue whether the success of long desert travel depended more on route knowledge, animal management, water planning, political alliances, or the discipline of daily routines. Dawn makes a strong case for routine. Nothing dramatic happens, yet everything necessary begins. Bedding is shaken, mats are folded, cooking things are gathered, water is checked, embers are examined to ensure they are dead or safely contained, ropes are coiled, cloth is brushed, loads are balanced. A camp that took an hour to become home can begin turning back into bundles with astonishing quietness. You help where you can, which mainly means staying out of the way until given a task appropriate to your skill level, such as holding a strap and not looking heroic. A rolled blanket is tied with 2 loops, a bag is closed so sand does not pour into it with theatrical enthusiasm. The shelter fabric is folded from the cleaner side inward. This detail matters. Folding carelessly means carrying a private dune to the next resting place. Someone shakes a mat, and the sand falls in a soft curtain. Sparkling briefly in blue morning light, it is almost beautiful, which is exactly how sand gets away with being annoying. The kettle returns to life, a little heat, a small flame, a careful pour. Morning drink is quieter than evening drink. People are not yet fully conversational. Their voices are low and rough with sleep. You hold a warm cup and feel your hands forgive the world. The taste is familiar now, sweet or bitter, smoky or plain, depending on what remains in the supplies. It warms the throat, then the chest, then the mind. Breakfast may be a piece of bread, dates, leftover grains, cheese, or something simple enough not to slow departure. The desert does not encourage a brunch personality. Light rises quickly once it commits. The blue becomes pearl, then gold begins touching the upper dunes or rocks. Shadows stretch long across the camp upwards, then shorten almost visibly. The temperature has not yet climbed. but you can sense the heat waiting. It is not dramatic yet. It is patient. The sun has excellent time management and no compassion for late sleepers. Animals are readied. Saddles, packs, blankets, and ropes are checked for rubs or looseness. A small mistake in loading can become a large misery after hours of walking. Weight must sit evenly, straps must not bite. An animal that complains may be ignored only by fools, camels, donkeys, goats, and horses, depending on region and journey, have carried human plans through dry country for centuries, but they do not do so without care. You watch a guide run a hand beneath a strap, feeling for pressure. It is tender work, though nobody makes it sentimental. Practical tenderness is still tenderness. The campsite is inspected, scraps are gathered, ash is dealt with properly, stones may be returned or left depending on custom and use. Nothing shiny is abandoned, nothing that could harm an animal is left behind. The goal is not to erase every trace, because humans are not ghosts, but to leave the place decent. The desert may cover carelessness, but that does not excuse it. A remote camp survives as an idea because each morning honours the next possible night. You stand and look outward. The horizon has regained its distance. What felt like an enclosed night room opens into immense travel again. Yet the morning does not feel harsh. It feels clean, almost forgiving. You have slept, or nearly slept, and the world has continued without needing your supervision. This is excellent news for everyone involved. The secret of waking before sunrise is that rest completes itself through departure. Sleep is not only closing the eyes, it is rising with enough calm to fold your shelter, warm your hands, read the ground, care for the animals, and meet the day before the heat takes command you. You take one last sip, the cup lowers, the first sun touches the sand, and the camp, once a little island of night, becomes motion again. The real secret of rest is not hidden inside a rare piece of equipment, though equipment does enjoy pretending to be mysterious. It is not the thickest blanket, the cleverest tent pole, the most expensive sleeping mat, or a travel pillow shaped like something invented during a committee meeting. Those things help. Of course, a good layer beneath you can feel like mercy, a covered cup can save your patience, a low shelter can turn wind from an enemy into background music. But the deeper secret is quieter than gear. It is the willingness to let the desert set the terms, then slowly become the kind of person who can sleep within them. You stand in the early light, watching the camp lose its shape. Bedding becomes rolls, shelter becomes folded cloth. A cooking space becomes a patch of sand with a few careful marks. The night that felt enormous now fits inside bundles, knots, memories, and a faint smell of ash on your sleeve. You understand that remote desert sleep is not a single trick. It is a chain of small agreements. You agree not to rush. You agree to drink wisely. You agree to respect ground, wind, animals, cold, dust, and darkness. You agree, most difficult of all, not to demand that comfort look exactly like home. Across history, desert camps have worked because they are rhythmic rather than permanent. The mainstream historical fact is that many nomadic and caravan communities organized life around mobility, seasonal movement, water access, grazing, trade routes, and temporary shelters that could be raised, repaired, packed, and carried. Their rest depended on repetition. Make camp, protect supplies, settle animals, share food, tell what needs remembering, sleep while the night allows it. Rise before heat returns. This rhythm is not romantic decoration. It is a survival system made soft enough to live inside. You feel the meaning of that rhythm in your body. The first night, the desert may have felt like an argument. Too open, too quiet, too gritty, too cold, too full of small sounds with suspicious intentions. Now, Those details have begun to arrange themselves into sense. A rope tapping is not a warning unless it changes. A camel's sigh is not prophecy. Though the camel may disagree, sand in a fold is annoying, not tragic. Cold air on the face can be clean rather than cruel. The mind learns by being shown the same calm pattern again and again. A quirky tidbit belongs to the great emptiness itself. Some remote desert camps are so far from city light that the night sky can cast faint shadows when the moon is bright, or when starlight is unusually clear to trained eyes. People have reported walking by the glow of stars and planets in places where darkness remains unpolluted by the lamps. It sounds impossible to a city sleeper, where the night is usually orange, buzzing, and interrupted by someone reversing a vehicle with the patience of a broken robot. Yet in the deep desert, natural light becomes more generous because artificial light has stopped shouting over it. The real secret also includes humility. Desert rest improves when you stop treating discomfort as an insult. A little grit does not mean failure. A cold nose does not mean disaster. A simple meal does not mean deprivation. A low tent does not mean poverty. These things can be signs of careful adjustment to a hard place. The camp is not trying to impress you. It is trying to last. There is dignity in that, and a kind of peace. The desert does not flatter human importance, which may be one reason it can calm a mind made tired by constant attention. Historians still argue whether outsiders have understood desert sleep mainly through fantasy, fear, military reports, travel literature, archaeology, or the lived knowledge of desert communities themselves. The question matters because the same camp can look barren to one observer and deeply organized to another. One person sees absence, another sees roots, wells, rites, seasons, kinship, memory, animal, weather, signs, and the correct place to put a blanket so the wind behaves itself for at least half the night. Knowledge changes the landscape without moving a single stone. You begin to see how surrender differs from helplessness. Helplessness says, I can do nothing here. Surrender says, I cannot control everything here, so I will do the useful things and release the rest. That is the sleeping mind the desert asks for. Check what can be checked, tie what can be tied, cover what can be covered, warm what can be warmed, then stop. The final part is hardest. The modern mind loves one more adjustment, one more worry, one more plan, one more tiny argument with reality. The desert offers no reward for that. It simply remains wide and quiet until you run out of objections. A remote camp teaches that rest is a relationship with place. In a bedroom, you may barely notice the walls. In the desert, every part of the setting participates. Ground supports, wind tests, cloth answers, animals listen, stars slow the thoughts, cold gathers the body inward, fire leaves its memory, food settles the stomach, stories soften the unknown, silence reveals what the mind has been carrying. Nothing is separate. Sleep is not something you force upon the desert. Sleep is something the camp prepares with the desert, grain by grain, cup by cup, knot by knot. So the secret is not merely survival, and it is not luxury. It is trust, built from small acts of attention. You trust the chosen ground because it was red. You trust the shelter because it was shaped. You trust the water because it was guarded. You trust the night because its sounds have names. You trust yourself because you have stopped needing everything to be familiar. That may be the rarest comfort of all, not softness, not silence, not perfection, but belonging briefly to the conditions around you. The sun lifts higher, the camp is nearly packed, the place where you slept is already becoming anonymous again, brushed by air, crossed by faint tracks, touched by light. Soon it will look as though no one rested there. Though you know better, for a few hours, the emptiness held a human pattern. It held warmth, caution, jokes, food, dust, breath, and sleep. You carry that pattern now, not as a souvenir, but as a quieter way of being, The desert has given no speech, signed no certificate, and offered no complimentary breakfast buffet, which is probably for the best. It has simply shown you that rest comes when attention becomes acceptance. Now the pace slows even more. The bright edge of morning softens in your mind, and the dunes grow less like distances to cross and more like gentle waves at the edge of sleep. You do not need to pack anything else. You do not need to solve the wind, count the stars, brush away every grain, or listen for every small sound. The camp has done what it came to do. It has held the night long enough for the body to remember how to be quiet. You breathe in, and the air is cool and plain. You breathe out, and the last little worries loosen, one by one, like knots untied in soft cloth. The camel lowers its head, the ashes fade into grey, the cups are empty and the blankets are folded, far away. The horizon glows with patient light, but you do not have to follow it anywhere now. Let the desert become simple, sand below, sky above, warmth near the heart, breath moving slowly, nothing chasing you, nothing asking more from you. The old camps, the travellers, the stars, the hidden wells, the low shelters, all drift into the same calm distance. Even the wind seems tired now, brushing the dunes with a softer hand, and as the last image fades, you are safe inside that wide, quiet room of night and memory. The desert keeps its secrets, but it has shared enough. Rest can be small. Rest can be humble. Rest can find you even at the far edge of the world, where the sand is still, the sky is deep, and every sound becomes softer and softer and softer. Sweet dreams.